I'm Alex, and I'm here to talk to you about the evolution of design at Atlassian and how our design system has changed over the last decade. Up until recently, I was the design manager for the Atlassian design system, and before that, I was the team lead, and before that, I was the designer, designer on the Atlassian design system. We face some common challenges with the Atlassian design system, as many of you have had as well. Things like buy-in and adoption and figuring out the right team. I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, and I'm going to talk to you about design systems as a shared language, as a style guide, as a product, and as a service, and ultimately as a community. I'm going to go through each one of these sections, so, sit back, relax, and hopefully you enjoy. Let's start off with design systems as a shared language. Atlassian was founded in 2002 by Mike and Scott, and it was an engineering-led company for engineers, by engineers, through and through. And we didn't hire a very first designer until 2010. And in 2012, the ratio of designers to engineers was 1:25. This improved over time. By 2015, the ratio was 1:9. And today, the ratio is 1:4. So it all began really with this guy, Juergen Sprenkel, the head of design at Atlassian, who was brought in to bring design, not just design really, but experience to an engineering-led organization. When I heard this story about Juergen, when he first joined the company, he went to design reviews with Mike and Scott, and he observed them ask designers the questions like, why is this button orange? And can you make this logo bigger? He actually heard them say that. And Juergen realized that if we don't elevate the types of questions and language we use about design, well, we're never going to scale ourselves in that way. He believed that what we needed to do was come up with a shared understanding between designers and engineers to make sure that the common elements of our designs were already agreed upon and didn't need to be discussed at design critique. He introduced the idea of the ADG, and the ADG is the Atlassian Design Guidelines. He'd said to Mike and Scott, we need to invest in this project. They, of course, were reluctant, like all founders, because that meant that some engineers weren't going to be shipping product and new features for Jira. It meant that engineers were going to be focused on this. But Juergen said that this is something so crucial that he would bet his job on it. And they listened and agreed. And so with that, we had the beginnings of the Atlassian Design Guidelines. By 2014 actually, that initiative grew and there was a website that was launched publicly. It was the Atlassian Design Experience. And it had, half a designer working on it in his spare time and a lot of goodwill. But it did have things like buttons. It had live code, and designers could stop asking, founders could stop asking designers what color the button should be or why the logo couldn't be any bigger. So, back then, 2014, we had buy-in, we had consistency, we even had live documentation, tick, 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 right, for all things design systems. However, things that we didn't really have back then and needed to think about were things like adoption. The design system was optional. We didn't really have content design, and there was certainly no team responsible for the Atlassian design language. And it felt like this was the right moment in time for us to evolve and thinking of ourselves beyond a shared language and moving ourselves into the realm of style guides. And this is where I came in. I joined Atlassian at 2015. Here I am, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, holding up my very favorite value of open company, no bullshit, which has served me very well over the years at Atlassian. And I came in asking the same question that many of you have asked in the past. This one. What is a design system? And some of you may be still asking yourselves this today. And as I figured this out, I came from a world of style guides. So I came from a place where brands were represented in mainly PDFs, and things were decided and documented once, and then they got out of date very quickly. And on my journey to figure out what a design system was, I realized I was asking the wrong question. What I really needed to be asking was, what business problems are we solving? And to be honest, there were plenty. This is the kind of feedback we were getting from our customers. Note, this is a date range for feedback. We've been getting this kind of feedback for a while. When I joined, our products looked like this. And yes, they were consistent, but my God, they were boring. And they were so bland and lifeless and nothing like the kinds of teams that we were hopeful that our products were being used by. So we did what we did best. We did what designers did best. We ran a workshop. And at Atlassian, these are called spikes. We brought together brand, marketing, product, content. Everybody came together in a room for a month. And we did a very hard thing. We agreed on things. That's really what design systems are about. Fundamentally, that's what makes them so hard, is that many people have to agree on a thing. We agreed between marketing and product on a single set of foundations. From these foundations, we created the Atlassian Design Guidelines version 3. They're called ADG 3. It's the name of a project that was spun out as a result of our spike. We came up with a brand new logo set, colors. We agreed on typography, which was quite difficult, to be honest. And we had UI components that we agreed on and patterns. The rest of the guidelines came later, but these were the things that came out of that workshop. And in addition, the big kahuna of design systems, we had adoption. Check out these products. I'm sure some of you have seen them out in the wild today. This is Jira and Confluence and Bitbucket, and we had a mobile app. And it was very exciting. All of this happened within the space of 12 months. And of course, we had an updated design site. This is actually a site that I designed, and I'm still pretty proud of it. And we had one for designers, and we also had a second site for engineers, for developer docs, because they also needed to use the components. More on that later. It was all very exciting. The launching ADG 3 was a huge coup, and my passion and excitement for the design system mixed in with my love of that value got me into the role of the team lead for the Atlassian design system. And back then, we had exciting things like adoption and content design, as it was in our website, and now we had a team with me being the team lead. All the things that, again, many companies wished and wanted from their design system. However, it kind of felt not that great because we shipped things so fast and moved at such lightning speed. We hadn't really considered coverage. The 5 products that we had 100% adoption, but if you looked under the hood, it was all a bit kind of stuck together. We had no idea how we were going to scale all of these patterns and components that we created bespoke for these 5 products. And we didn't have something called a triad. This was a standard operating way at Atlassian between attention between product design and engineering. We definitely did not have that. Again, it was time for us to evolve. We had to move beyond style guides and think of ourselves as a product. And what Design System Talk would be out there if it didn't have a quote from Mr. Curtis? And when I read this quote in 2016, my little eyes lit up. I was a team lead for a flailing project that was kind of done and needed to understand of how am I going to sell this into leadership? How am I going to evolve the design system from this project into a product? And there it was. And it made so much sense. Atlassian was a company of products. We had them everywhere. We had a mechanism of shipping product. We understood how products worked. And when the team needed to evolve and think of themselves as a product, it made a lot of sense. We had to scale. We had to scale from the 5 original products that we shipped for ADG 3 to the rest of the product suite. And we advocated, open company, no bullshit, got myself a PM, very excited, and there we were. We had a triad, a product triad who could speak to other product triads and understand their roadmap and their needs. So it felt like we were cooking with gas. And because we were trying to scale to 16 products and now we had a true triad, we had a massive team. And what did all these people do? I get this question asked all the time. So we have the leads, and we also had designers. We had 6 designers at the time, and their skills ranged from interaction and mobile, as well as front-end coding and illustration. We also had front-end devs, very much interested in front-end UI. We had a design tooling team. This was very interesting to start off with the design system team. And we had content design. Let me take a minute here to say how crucial I believe content design is to design systems. It should be there from the very beginning, and it is something that is often overlooked. And back then we had the one content designer on our team, and we have scaled that now to many more. and we're working very closely with the content design org on the future of our design system. But I digress. Here we all are doing something in person, which I know is almost foreign in this current circumstances. This is all 22 of us building this Atlassian design system. And what were we building? Well, we were building all the things. As we were now a product, and we had 16 products knocking on our door, asking us for many, many things and many, many iterations. All in all, we created 60 components for products around the company. We also created over 90 guidelines to go with these 60 components of how to use certain aspects of the design system. It felt amazing. This huge team, this amazing design system product, we were on fire. We had coverage, scale, and the all-elusive triad. However, there was something that we weren't really thinking about or focusing on because we were so busy shipping. We weren't really thinking about onboarding. We certainly weren't thinking about how these design tools are being used by our consumers, and we were not asking how satisfied people really were. And when we finally stopped and took a minute and paused and asked, we got this. And we weren't really surprised because the struggle was real. Although we were shipping and moving things very quickly and had a we had a lot of volume, we also didn't really have a repeatable process. We had a beautiful design site, but the documentation got out of date very quickly. We also were causing a lot of friction between designers and engineers out in the wild because some of our designs on the design site were aspirational and some of the code on the code side didn't match those designs. And so it is no wonder that the customers, the people using the design systems, weren't particularly happy with us. And once again, we needed to pivot. It's the word of 2020. We needed to evolve and think of ourselves beyond a product for products. We needed to think of ourselves as a service for people. When we think of ourselves as a product, it's something that people want. It's something that they can pick up off the shelf, take it or leave it. Thinking of ourselves as a service is much more nuanced. You have to think of ourselves as a need. What do people need, and how do we provide that need to them? Atlassian scaled dramatically. The organization grew and grew. This is all of us, all of these people, designers, engineers, front-enders, researchers, content design, marketing, product. All of these people needed to use the design system, and all we were focused on is product roadmaps. We needed to stop. There is that value coming in again. I had to use my open company, no bullshit value and say, we need to stop shipping. And at Atlassian, that's pretty big. We never really stopped, but we had to. We had no choice. And we said the 60 components and 90 guidelines were enough. So we stopped shipping and we started talking. We did some research. We started talking to our consumers. We creeped on the way people worked. We watched them use the tools. We asked them questions. We got them to do diary studies. We also spoke to new starters. What is the expectation that they had around a design system? Many of them never used one before. And that's when we came to the conclusion that designers needed onboarding. They needed to understand that what has been done for the design system before. We onboarded 312 people over the course of 18 months. And that seems like a lot, and it's very exciting. But we didn't start there. We started with just a simple keynote talking about the aspects of the design system and some of the history. That evolved into a much more robust self-service where people could sign up to classes that they could download and watch on their free time. So that took us some time to figure out. Something else that we hadn't realized because we weren't really speaking to our customers before is what is the type of things that designers did in Figma and our tooling. These are the latest three things that we have just released over the last couple of weeks. We created table generators and internationalization checkers and data generators. We would have never realized that this is something people wanted. When we watched them and asked them questions, we realized this is something that people needed to speed up their work. We created these plug-and-play components in Figma to ensure that designers were spending less time creating tables in Figma and more time focusing on the flow. The internationalization checker helped designers understand where their designs were breaking down. And the data generators ensured that we had consistency across all of the stories that we were showing in our flows and not breaching any copyright issues with images or using words from songs and things like that. There was a level of polish that we were able to bring to designers' work. And not only that, we were also able to save time. Time means money. C-suite loves this, and so do designers. from a practical perspective, designers are so much happier when they don't have to do mundane tasks. But from a C-suite perspective, they were also very happy because that means we could get more designers. And so when we were able to prove the value of our design tooling, we got more resources. Other things we did when we thought of ourselves as a service was investment in Slack. At one point, we had a community manager for our Slack channel as we had so many requests from all over the company. We turned that into a service desk with SLAs and a single source where designers could go ask any question around the design system. Something that we continue to invest in is design sparring for the design system. This started off as a casual meeting once a month where people will come together and talk about different patterns and components. And today it is hosted twice a week across 5 different time zones to ensure that all designers across Atlassian are able to have a place to talk about components and patterns. And with that sparring across 5 different time zones, we had to have a global team. We have designers in the US looking after the products that are based in the US, and we also have designers in Sydney. So with that, we started to ask our customers how were they feeling about all of these offerings that we're giving as a service. And lo and behold, the numbers went up. They were not amazing, but they were definitely trending in the right direction. We now had onboarding, we had design tooling that was meeting some needs, and the satisfaction was showing how this was going to get better. As we look forward into FY21, we started to think about what would we be focusing on next. As I mentioned, we shipped so many things so quickly, we really needed to think about how we're going to harden our foundations. How are we going to create a true contribution model? And what does it mean to create a community around our design system? These are some of the things that we are thinking about as we look forward into the next year. And evolving ourselves from thinking ourselves just as a service for people into a community for all. I love this tweet from Jenny Yip. She's the lead designer on the Atlassian design system. This tweet culminates 2 years worth of work. We took a first step in the right direction when we created a single home for the Atlassian design system. No more 2 sites, no more one site for engineers, one site for designers. We came together as a team, and I think it was so beautiful to watch, even from the sidelines, that this team came together and created this incredible site. The site is just the first step. And it's not just beautiful, it's also steeped in research. It embodies exactly what the users wanted. It makes sure that the IA and all of the labels, all of the code and the infrastructure behind it is servicing multiple disciplines at the same time. Content designers are able to come in and edit this using Contentful. Engineers are able to add dev docs in the way that they used to. And designers are able to access all of it all in one place. It is a beautiful site, but also it's not that it's just the outcome, but also it's how it's going to help us build a community. Jenny said it great, and I'm so thrilled that Jenny's joined our team and that she's going to be leading the design system into the future. And I look forward to the next phase of the Atlassian design system. Just to wrap up and reflect on some of the things that we talked about. Here at Atlassian, we've been on a bit of a journey, and I've shared most of it here with you today. And you may be at a different point on the same journey, or you may be on a slightly different one. The goal of your design system might not be the same as ours. You might be the only or lonely designer or researcher or product designer trying to get this off the ground, or you could be already in a well-established team. All of these things could be different. The one thing that I will say that remains the same is the customers. Who are the people using your design system? What do they need? Ask them that, and I promise you that's what's going to make them happy. I really appreciate your time. It's been such an honor and a personal thrill of mine to be part of Clarity, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with you after my talk. Thanks very much.
Alex, what a good talk. I could not have thought of a better way to end this day. We have lots of questions pouring in from the chat. That was such a good story that you shared. I have lots of questions to ask you. The first one is, what kind of shoes do you think ninjas wear?
Soft shoes?
Ninjas have to wear sneakers.
Because they sneak.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All things should start with a dad joke.
That's right. I agree with that. My kids wouldn't agree with that, though. I'll tell you that.
No, neither would mine. That would be horrified.
All right, let's talk about all the different parts of that story. Lots of questions pouring in from the chat. Let's start kind of high level. You talked about the last 5 years and that progression from design system and style guide all the way through to products and services and building community. Hindsight 2020, hindsight is dangerous too. Could you have, knowing what you know now, if you were to start a design system today, would you just go for, okay, we need to build community? Or are those the deliberate steps that you have to go through to get to where the Atlassian design system is today?
Great question. I had a similar question in my workshop yesterday. I love hindsight because it does give you that time to pause and reflect and learn. So I really enjoy doing these talks because I had to sort of evaluate like at every pivot and think about what did we learn and what did we want to do next. And I really enjoyed that process. And I don't think starting with the community makes sense. Maybe this is controversial, or maybe it isn't. I think you need something. You need the components. You need the pieces. And I think there was a comment earlier that I read, or a tweet around just start somewhere. There isn't this perfect path. And I think sharing this story, my goal was to make sure that people nodded along and were like, oh, we're at this point, we're at that point. Oh, that makes sense. And oh, that could be the next thing we do, or maybe we need to take a step back. And I think just like laying it out that way was really my way for people to kind of +1 on certain parts of their specific journey. And I don't think starting at the end makes sense and sort of like, then you'll have it right. There is no right way to make a design system. It's always messy and it's really hard. And we're constantly learning kind of as we go along, and there's always pivots and the company changes and the requirements change. So it was just a nice way to look back and kind of see how we got to where we got to today and why we're focusing on what we're focusing on. But starting at meeting your needs at kind of where your customers are at. I think that's a really great way to start. Look at what your company needs. Look, what can you hitch your wagon to? I kept using that term yesterday in my workshop. What's happening in your organization that makes sense to have a design system as a solution rather than an end goal of itself.
Awesome. There are lots of questions about like kind of in the weeds detail stuff. So started broad, we're going to zoom way in and then we'll zoom way out at the end of it. The top one is from Rachel. How do you measure the saved design hours? Like how do you quantify that?
So what we did, we got designers in a room and we got them to do an exercise with our tools, our design system, and without, and we timed it. And we did this iteratively over a couple of quarters. And so we saw, as we built more and more design tooling, and design tooling is representative of our design system, we could see how much faster designers are working using this tooling. And we used those raw numbers to advocate for budget, to keep the intern that was working on it, shout out to Hugh, to get another intern to keep working on the design tooling, to kind of maintain that whole team. So we used that kind of data, hours saved per designer across the company. And we also used it to project forward. So when you looked at the numbers in terms of who we're hiring and projecting, like we're going to hire, I'm just, using this as an example, 50 designers in the next year, how much potential time can we save them if we invest in design tooling? So I think using those kind of formulas, they're pretty basic, but very powerful, especially when you convert them into dollars. When you look at like an average salary for a designer. As an example, you could do the same thing with engineering. We did the same thing with engineering, like how much engineering hours we're saving across the company. The numbers were even more staggering than for design.
And all of those are extrapolated numbers. Those aren't real numbers. Those are like, if we continue to do this, this is kind of what our savings would be. And that was enough to convince people?
Yes, I think showing that value together with the satisfaction score, I think really we do speak to designers and we ask them. We recently did a survey around how satisfied they are with what we've been providing. And so together with the time saved, it's never just numbers alone. I talk a little bit about that in the sense of adoption. It's the same here. It's not just like, oh, we're saving people time, that must means we're winning. We need to make sure we're saving people time and actually asking them how they're feeling and how they feel about using the design system. And if the satisfaction is trending up, together with time saved, that feels like a much healthier way to measure success.
Maybe this is a related question, but Sam asked, so how do you get buy-in for pausing shipping? How do you even get people to go like, yeah, you could take off for a little while and do some other things?
Good question. So we looked at coverage. I think when I talk about coverage, we had an average of 60 components, and we're trying to get coverage across so many products in the Atlassian suite. And so when we did take, everything starts with an audit. When we did take stock and have a look at how much coverage we were providing, it felt like that was enough for a lot of the teams to keep going. We weren't going to be blockers. We weren't going to be stopping anyone. It felt like there was a great base of all of the components available. Using that and then having cutbacks in resourcing for the design system team, hashtag other reasons, in terms of company priority, we had to decide as a group what will be the one thing we're going to invest in that next quarter and in that next year, in order to kind of empower the most number of people. And for us, it was figuring out our multiple design systems and multiple design websites. And because if we didn't kind of invest in that place and we kept shipping more components or fielding more requests, which we're back to doing right now, but at the time we needed to stop in order to keep going. And so putting that case together was something that I did with the help of course, of the team. And, there was lots of questions, but what do you mean? You're just going to work on the website? Well, yes, because, and then we kind of hark back to, this is how much time we're going to save people and how much time we're going to save for the design system team, because we didn't have to keep answering the questions of, is this out of date? Like we had a community manager for our Slack channel for a little while. Shout out to Kelvin. And he did stats around how many questions we get and what are the topics we get in terms of, and the predominant one was, is this the latest version of that? Or is this the right guideline? Or is this the right, and that kind of super basic stuff was taking up a lot of team bandwidth to actually match things up for people. And so when we realized that was our biggest pain point and it felt like we really needed to focus on that, we used that as a way to make the case to focus on the website.
Angelos has a good question about tooling. You all have a custom website, or at least it looks like one. Do you have opinions about tools that automate things like reference site and style guide sites, things like Zero Height and things like that? Are there pros and cons to doing it? Why did you all decide to build a custom thing for that as opposed to use some out-of-the-box solution?
We definitely talked around a lot about this. This was a point of kind of a heated debate and discussion across the team. Everybody has an opinion, and that's great. I think it's important to have everybody's voice heard. It kind of came back to the research and the customers. And by customers, I mean the consumers of our design system. When we spoke to those teams and those individuals, specifically people like content design, who were incredibly passionate and excited to be part of our design system, they needed a different tool set. They needed a CMS. There was a global, there's a company-wide CMS decision made, and we wanted to piggyback onto the process that was already happening internally at Atlassian. We used Contentful for a lot of our documentation already. And we wanted to, as I said earlier, meet our, consumers of the design system where they were at, rather than introducing another tool set or another platform for them to use. And I don't think this would work for lots of smaller teams or smaller design systems. But for us, as we're expanding and really made the case that this website was going to help the design system and ultimately Atlassian scale, we wanted to make sure that it was servicing as many audiences and as many different needs. Like brand and marketing have a section, and they have very different needs because they need to have vendors actually accessing some of the downloads and things like that. Then we had the content designers looking to update the documentation using Contentful. Then we had obviously developers and developer documentation that needed. So it kind of had all of these different needs based on our consumers.
Okay, got it. You're 5 years into the Atlassian design system. Can you talk a little bit about your contribution model? So especially for component building, Angelos asks about that. What does it look like to contribute to a new component?
So we think about contribution not in the maybe kind of the way people consider, like kind of have it in their mind's eye. We think about it as more of a collaboration. So we think about what are the kinds of projects that we can collaborate on with teams, and then how can we bring the pieces of those projects back into the system. True contribution at the kind of scale that we're at is very expensive. It's expensive in the way that the quality that needs to be upheld, the amount of kind of wrangling and cat herding, and all of the other pieces that need to come together in order for the contribution to be successful into the design system outweigh us doing it ourselves. And I don't think that's scalable at all. I think contribution model is right up there in terms of priorities next for the team. I know Jenny Yip, who's now the lead designer for the design system, has tweeted a lot of the plans that we have coming up for the design system. Contribution was right up there. And for us, it's about building that community. And that's something that I've felt very passionate about for the last 5 years, is getting people to think in systems ways and getting them to consider beyond the feature they're working on, getting to consider the ramifications of how the thing that they're designing will impact their neighbors or the team next to them or the team across the ocean. So I think how kind of those are the kinds of rituals that I've been involved in building from a community perspective. And that has been something that has been kind of the journey there, which I think will dovetail really well into the true contribution model that I think the team is focused on next.
Can we dive into that product partnership a little bit more? Rachel has a related question, which is like, how do you convince PMs and engineers to contribute to the design system when they're so focused on their own release work? And, do they see it as like, oh, that's not worth our time. We got to get our own products out the door. We can't contribute. That seems like a side thing. Are you experiencing any of that?
Absolutely. And we've experienced that for quite some time. And some of the things that we've been doing to mitigate, and not even mitigate, but really enable design engineers and PMs to see the value. Engineers have seen the value of this for a long time, because I think engineers have had libraries. Atlassian is an engineering company for engineers by engineers. So design has kind of come along later. So not so much that we needed to convince engineering, but from a PM perspective, that's a really good point. When we had a PM on the design system team, that was a great vehicle for us to get in on product roadmaps. So having that PM discipline, that PM function, helped us PM to PM. They speak PM. So it really helped to understand how might we piggyback off already existing initiatives. And so that was one of our ways of dealing with that from a PM perspective.
Got it. How about testing and QA? We're going all over the map here. Questions are, I think a lot of people are interested in at the scale that you're working at and at the maturity level that the Atlassian design system team is working at. How do you do certain things? And I imagine they're trying to relate them to maybe some earlier stage that they're at in their companies or their organizations. Testing and QA, how does that fit into the process of building design systems at Atlassian?
We had some dedicated testing and QA as part of design. I think it's going back to kind of that community building aspect. We have an incredibly active Slack channel. We have advocates across the company, making sure that, one of Atlassian's values, as I mentioned, is, open company, no bullshit. We get pulled up by our bootstraps quite quickly if anything that we ship has any kind of nuances or bugs or anything like that. So everybody jumps on it and everybody's very passionate. And I think it's taken a lot of time to build that passion for the design system and making everybody feel like it's not just, it's that team over there that owns it. We all own it. And I think that shared ownership is a kind of a gateway to hopefully a successful contribution model. But the shared ownership comes with a lot of advocacy. And I think being that voice, being that, face, neck of the design system in your company, I can't kind of say enough about how important that is for the design system to have that presence and to have that sense of shared ownership.
Awesome. We got two more here and then we'll kind of wrap this up. So second to last question here. What's difficult for you right now? What's the hard thing that you're facing?
So the things that I've heard from the team, I'm no longer on the team. I've had the honor of talking about this design system, but I've shifted into product. So I'm on the other side of the fence, dare I say. I'm a design manager for Confluence right now, and I am consuming the design system. And I think it's really interesting to be on the other side of the fence. Maybe there's a talk in that sometime, but how we're using the design system that, was built over time, and what are the needs of my design team right now, and how can the design system meet that? An example of that is dark mode. An example of that is accessibility. How can we work together on some of these patterns? And what I'm loving being on the other side is, it's the same side, but you know what I mean, is really taking responsibility from a product perspective of what can we do, rather than expecting things from the design system. Like, what can we do as a product to help shape the next phase of the design system? And for us, it's mobile, right? I tried to get a mobile design system off the ground while I was in the design system team, and that has just not been successful. I've tried and tried, and it wasn't successful because it just wasn't on the roadmap. And products will take it if you have it. That was really the kind of thing I kept hearing from product. And it's like, well, if you've got the mobile stuff, well, we'll use it. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're not asking for it, we're not going to prioritize it. And it just went round and round. Now I'm in Confluence. We're going to have a design system, starting with Confluence, but building it in a way that's, Confluence specific, but very much aware of all of the other needs from products. And then how can we scale that? And now it kind of becomes a very different conversation when it's product driven. So I'm excited about those kinds of challenges, helping shape the future of the design system from the product side.
Awesome. Last question for you, and there's kind of a part A and part B to it. So what advice can you share for people in two environments right now? One is the team that's like, yep, we realize that we need a style guide. So early on, it was kind of your first phase that you talked about. What can you share for the team that's in that perspective? And then the part B is for teams that are in the same spot as the design system team there, where you realize you've got to evolve from being a service to even creating a community around design systems. What advice can you share at both of those ends of the spectrum?
I think on both ends of the spectrum is keep talking to your consumers. I think as soon as you start to go heads down and like, oh, we'll just be over here creating some stuff, we'll show it to you when we're done. That is the biggest lesson that I learned, the biggest kind of trap of wanting to create a perfect design system or showing it when it's done or showing it when it's good. It's never done. It's never that good. It's always just evolving and growing. And I feel like it doesn't matter if you're creating a style guide, make sure you're doing it with the right partners. So you're doing it with your brand, you're doing it with your engineering, you're doing it with all of the people that are going to ultimately have to use it. And the same thing, all the way down the other end of the spectrum, if you're not talking to the consumers of your design system on a weekly basis, we do it now on a bi-weekly basis, then you're really kind of throwing these things over a wall rather than having the handshakes at every step of the way. That's kind of where I want to leave it.
Alex, this is awesome. We could listen to you for hours, talk about this design system, and maybe we will try to get you to do that at some point. Thank you for sharing all this. Thank you for an awesome talk. What a great way to end the first day of Clarity.